My wealthy relatives turned their backs on me in my darkest hour, saying they couldn't spare the time or money, but now they're the ones begging for my help, and I've completely mastered the art of saying no. I, 32M, never thought I'd be the one writing this story, but here I am, finally ready to share what happened with my family over the past 2 years. It's been a wild ride from rock bottom to where I am now, and honestly, the irony is so thick you could cut it with a knife. 2 years ago, my world fell apart in the span of a single week. My wife left me for her personal trainer, taking half of everything in the divorce. My small tech consulting business went under when my biggest client pulled out without warning, leaving me with massive debts and no income. To top it all off, I was diagnosed with a rare autoimmune condition that required expensive treatment not fully covered by insurance. I was drowning, not just financially, but emotionally and physically too. The medical bills were piling up, I couldn't afford my mortgage payments, and I was facing the very real possibility of losing my house. That's when I swallowed my pride and reached out to my family for help. My family isn't just well off, they're wealthy. My uncle owns a chain of successful restaurants across 3 states. My cousin runs a thriving real estate empire. My brother-in-law is a partner at a major law firm. These aren't people struggling to make ends meet. These are people who spend more on their annual vacations than most people make in a year. I started with my uncle, the one who used to ruffle my hair at family gatherings and tell me I was his favorite nephew. I explained my situation, told him I wasn't asking for charity, just a loan to help me get back on my feet. He listened patiently, made all the right sympathetic noises, then told me he was tied up in some investments and couldn't spare the cash right now. Maybe in a few months, he said. My cousin was next. She'd always been the successful one in the family, the golden child who could do no wrong. I figured if anyone would understand business struggles, it would be her. She told me she was sorry to hear about my troubles, but she had her own financial commitments and couldn't risk lending money to family. It gets messy, she said. She hoped I understood. One by one, I went through the list. My brother-in-law said his firm had policies about personal loans. My wealthy aunt claimed she was having cash flow issues with her boutique hotels. Even my own sister, who married into money, told me she couldn't help without discussing it with her husband first, and he wasn't comfortable with it. The responses were all variations of the same theme. Sorry, can't help, wish we could, maybe later, you understand. What hurt most wasn't just the rejection, it was how quickly they all seemed to forget I existed after I asked. Family gatherings became awkward affairs where conversations would stop when I entered a room. Invitations to events mysteriously stopped coming. I remember sitting in my nearly empty house, most of my furniture already sold to pay bills, wondering how people who claimed to love me could watch me struggle and do nothing. The bitterness was eating me alive, but I channeled it into something productive, determination. I had to declare bankruptcy, lost the house, and moved into a tiny studio apartment in a rough part of town. But I didn't give up. I took every freelance job I could find, worked 18-hour days, and slowly started building something new. The medical treatment was helping, and my health was improving. More importantly, I was learning skills I never knew I had. During those dark months, I discovered I had a talent for digital marketing and automation. I started small, helping local businesses optimize their online presence. Word spread, and soon I was consulting for larger companies. I reinvested every penny back into the business, living on ramen noodles and determination. The breakthrough came when I developed a proprietary software solution for restaurant management systems. It was born out of spite, actually. I knew the restaurant industry inside and out from listening to my uncle complain about operational inefficiencies for years. I figured if he wouldn't help me, I'd help myself by solving problems in his industry. The software took off. Within 6 months, I had restaurants across the country using my system. The recurring revenue model meant steady income, and the profit margins were incredible. I hired a small team, moved to a better office, and started expanding into other industries. By the end of the first year, I was making more money than I ever had in my life. By the end of the second year, I was genuinely wealthy. Not just comfortable, wealthy. The kind of wealthy where you stop looking at price tags and start thinking about investments and tax strategies. That's when the phone call started. My uncle was the first to reach out. He'd heard through the family grapevine that I was doing well and wanted to catch up. We should have lunch, he said. It had been too long since we'd talked. During that lunch, He spent an hour telling me about his expansion plans and how he was looking for investors. He needed someone who understood the restaurant business, someone he could trust. Family, you know. I listened politely, asked a few questions, and told him I'd think about it. The look of expectation on his face was priceless. He was so confident that I'd jump at the chance to help him, just like he'd been so confident in his refusal to help me. My cousin called next. Her real estate empire wasn't doing as well as she'd projected. The market had shifted, and she was over-leveraged on several properties. She needed a partner, someone with liquid capital who could help her weather the storm. She'd always seen potential in me, she said. We could make a great team. The calls kept coming. My brother-in-law's firm was looking for tech consultants for a major client. My aunt needed help modernizing her hotel booking systems. Even my sister reached out, suddenly interested in my life and success, suggesting we should spend more time together as a family. The most satisfying moment came at my cousin's wedding reception 6 months ago. I'd been invited. Suddenly I was welcome at family events again, and was sitting at the head table when my uncle approached me. He'd had a few drinks and was feeling sentimental. He told me how proud he was of my success, how he'd always known I had it in me. Then he leaned in close and asked if we could talk privately about a business opportunity. I looked at him, this man who'd watched me lose everything and offered nothing but empty sympathy, and I smiled. I told him I was flattered by his confidence in me, but I was tied up in some investments and couldn't spare the cash right now. Maybe in a few months. The look on his face was everything I'd hoped for and more. The confusion, the disappointment, the slow realization that I was throwing his own words back at him. He started to say something, but I excused myself to get another drink. That's when I realized I'd truly mastered the art of saying no. Not just the word itself, but the entire performance. The polite smile, the sympathetic tone, the reasonable-sounding excuse, the vague promise of future consideration. I'd learned from the masters, after all. The requests haven't stopped. If anything, they've intensified as my success has become more apparent. I bought a house in the same exclusive neighborhood where several of my relatives live. I drive a car that costs more than most people's annual salary. I take vacations to places they can only dream about, and I make sure to post just enough on social media for them to see. My aunt cornered me at a family barbecue last month, telling me about her cash flow problems and how a small loan would make all the difference. She'd always been like a second mother to me, she reminded me. Family should help family, she said. I nodded sympathetically and told her I understood completely. Unfortunately, I had my own financial commitments and couldn't risk lending money to family. It gets messy, I explained. I hoped she understood. The beautiful thing about wealth is that it gives you options. I could help them all if I wanted to. I have more money than I know what to do with, and their problems are relatively small compared to my resources. But I choose not to, and that choice feels more powerful than any amount of money in my bank account. Some people might say I'm being petty or vindictive. They might argue that I should be the bigger person, that holding grudges is unhealthy. But I disagree. There's something profoundly satisfying about watching people who showed you their true character when you needed them most now scramble to win your favor. I'm not cruel about it. I don't humiliate them or throw their past behavior in their faces. I simply treat them exactly as they treated me, with polite indifference and reasonable-sounding excuses. The difference is that my excuses are choices, while theirs were revelations of character. Update 1. The situation escalated dramatically last week during my grandmother's birthday party. The whole family was there, and the tension was thick enough to cut with a knife. Everyone knew about my success by now, and everyone had their own sob story about why they needed my help. My uncle pulled me aside after dinner and dropped the pretense entirely. His restaurant chain was in serious trouble, he admitted. The pandemic had hit harder than expected, and he'd made some bad decisions trying to expand too quickly. He needed a significant investment to avoid bankruptcy, and he was asking me as family to help save the business that had been in our family for 3 generations. The irony wasn't lost on me. 3 generations of family business, and when I was facing my own version of bankruptcy, that family connection meant nothing. Now it was supposed to be my responsibility to preserve the legacy. I told him I was sorry to hear about his troubles, but I had learned from experience that mixing family and money was a bad idea. I'd seen too many relationships destroyed by financial entanglements. Surely he could understand that. He didn't take it well. He accused me of being heartless, of forgetting where I came from. He reminded me of all the family gatherings he'd hosted, all the birthday presents he'd given me as a child. He said I owed it to the family to help. That's when I finally lost my composure. I reminded him of exactly where I'd come from, rock bottom, with nowhere to turn and no one to help. I told him I remembered every single conversation I'd had with family members during my darkest hour, every excuse, every polite refusal, every sudden change in their behavior toward me. The room went quiet. Everyone was staring at us, and I realized I'd raised my voice. But I wasn't done. I told him that he was right about one thing. I did owe something to my family. I owed them the same consideration they'd shown me when I needed help. My cousin tried to intervene, suggesting that we were all family and should support each other. She said that my success meant I had a responsibility to help others who were struggling. The hypocrisy was breathtaking. I looked around the room at all these people who had turned their backs on me, who had made me feel like a pariah for having the audacity to ask for help when I was drowning. Now they wanted to lecture me about family responsibility and mutual support. I told them all exactly what I thought. I explained that they had taught me valuable lessons about family loyalty and what it really meant. They had shown me that family was conditional, that love came with terms and conditions, and that when push came to shove, everyone was on their own. The party ended shortly after that. People made their excuses and left, and I haven't heard from most of them since. My grandmother was upset, and I felt bad about ruining her birthday, but I was tired of pretending that everything was fine. Update 2. The fallout from the birthday party was swift and predictable. Within days, I was getting calls from various family members, but not the kind I expected. Instead of apologies or attempts at reconciliation, I was getting lectures about forgiveness and moving on. My sister called to tell me that I was being unreasonable and that holding grudges was unhealthy. She said that everyone makes mistakes and that I should be more understanding of the difficult position my relatives had been in when I asked for help. After all, she reminded me, lending money to family is complicated, and they had their own responsibilities to consider. I asked her if she remembered what those responsibilities were, exactly. What pressing financial obligations had prevented her from helping her own brother avoid homelessness? She got quiet and eventually hung up. My mother called next. She'd heard about the confrontation and was disappointed in me. She said that success had changed me, made me hard and unforgiving. The son she raised would never have spoken to his family that way, she claimed. That conversation hurt more than the others because part of me wondered if she was right. Had I become someone I didn't recognize? But then I remembered sitting in that empty house, calling everyone I thought loved me, and being turned away by each one. The son she raised had been naive enough to believe that family meant something. The man I'd become had learned better. The most interesting call came from my cousin's husband. He'd never been particularly close to me, but he'd witnessed the entire transformation from the outside. He told me that while he understood my anger, I was missing an opportunity to be the bigger person. He suggested that I could use my success to heal the family rifts and bring everyone together. I asked him if he thought I should just forget what happened and pretend everything was fine. He said that sometimes that's what it takes to maintain family relationships. I told him that I'd tried maintaining family relationships when I needed them most, and it hadn't worked out well for me. But the call that really got to me came from my grandmother. She was hurt and confused about what had happened at her party. She didn't understand why there was so much anger and resentment in the family. She asked me to explain what had gone wrong. So I told her everything. I explained how I'd reached out to everyone when I was struggling, how I'd been turned away by people who claimed to love me, how I'd felt abandoned and forgotten. I told her about the years of rebuilding, the determination that had driven me to succeed, and the bitter satisfaction I felt in being able to say no to the same people who had said no to me. She listened quietly, and when I was finished, she was quiet for a long time. Finally, she said that she was sorry she hadn't known how bad things had gotten for me. She said that if she'd known, she would have helped, even though she was on a fixed income and didn't have much to spare. That conversation broke something inside me. Here was an elderly woman living on Social Security, offering to help when people with millions in assets had turned me away. It made me realize that the issue wasn't about money at all. It was about character. Update 3. 3 months have passed since the birthday party incident, and the family dynamics have settled into a new normal. Most of my relatives have stopped reaching out entirely, which is honestly a relief. The constant requests for help and the awkward conversations about family obligations have ended. But something unexpected happened last month. My uncle's restaurant chain did go bankrupt, just as he'd predicted. The news hit the local business community hard because his restaurants had been fixtures in the area for decades. I felt a complicated mix of emotions when I heard satisfaction that my prediction had come true, but also genuine sadness for the employees who lost their jobs and the legacy that was ending. A few days after the bankruptcy announcement, I got a call from my uncle's daughter, my cousin who I'd grown up with. She wasn't calling to ask for money or to lecture me about family responsibility. She was calling to apologize. She told me that watching her father's business collapse had given her perspective on what I must have gone through. She said she finally understood the desperation I must have felt when I was reaching out for help, and she was sorry for not being there when I needed support. Her apology was genuine, and it caught me off guard. I'd been so focused on the satisfaction of revenge that I hadn't expected anyone to actually understand my perspective. We talked for over an hour, and for the first time in years, it felt like a real conversation between family members. She asked if there was any way I could help her father, not as an investment or a loan, but as a gesture of forgiveness. She wasn't asking me to save the business that was already gone, but maybe to help him find a way forward. He was in his 60s, had never worked for anyone else, and was struggling with the idea of starting over. I told her I'd think about it, and I have been. The old me would have jumped at the chance to help. The current me enjoys the power of being able to choose. But there's a third option I'm considering: selective compassion. I've decided to help my uncle, but not in the way he would expect or want. I'm not going to invest in a new restaurant or give him money to start over. Instead, I'm going to offer him a job. A regular, entry-level position at one of my companies, with the same salary and benefits as any other employee. It's not charity, and it's not a handout. It's an opportunity to earn his way back, to understand what it's like to start from the bottom and work your way up. It's a chance for him to learn humility and to understand the value of the help he once refused to give. I called him yesterday and made the offer. The silence on the other end of the line was deafening. He asked if I was serious, if I really expected him to work as an employee after running his own business for 30 years. I told him that everyone has to start somewhere, and that I'd learned the value of hard work during my own difficult period. He hasn't given me an answer yet, but I know he's considering it. His pride is warring with his practical needs, and I'm curious to see which will win. Either way, I've made my peace with the situation. The truth is, I don't need their approval or their gratitude anymore. I've built something meaningful from nothing, and I've learned that the most important person to rely on is yourself. The family that turned their backs on me taught me that lesson, and for that, I'm actually grateful. I've mastered the art of saying no, but I'm also learning the art of strategic yes. Not because I need to prove anything or because I'm seeking revenge, but because I can choose to help on my own terms. That choice, that power to decide who deserves my time and resources, is worth more than any amount of money in the bank. The boy who once begged for help from people who claim to love him is gone. In his place is a man who understands that respect is earned, that family is about more than blood, and that sometimes the best revenge is simply living well enough to have options. Whether my uncle takes the job or not, I've already won. I've become the person I needed when I was at my lowest point, and that's something no one can take away from me.